I just knew they were gonna keep Hayase around. It's like so funny because I watched this entire episode 20 of To Your Eternity. This is my impressions on it, by the way. Spoilers. Uh, yeah, I knew this was coming. I speculated on it last episode. I had an enjoyable time watching this episode, but it's sad that it's all stained by that one like 5-second clip of this guy walking up to this shack and this arm grabbing him into there. I was like, yeah, that's Hayase. She's still around. Yep, and she's become a knocker, so she's probably immortal. And it sucks. It's like, let this character go. Yoshitoki, Oima, let this character go. It was surprising to see who was actually in the OP. This, I think she was purple-haired. The girl that was in the OP, like I mentioned prior, it's like we've seen all the scenes, but I was curious if this was going to be a second season coming around the corner just because this OP had a character in it that has not been in the show yet. And lo and behold, it's actually Perona. So, not Perona, Pioren. I'm like, okay, cool, that makes sense. I wasn't expecting what that's implying. That's the shocker part, though. Yeah, pretty much I don't want to get into like full breakdown of each segment in this episode. A lot of it really centered around pretty much the beginning part, Fushi realizing that he's lonely. That was something that he just he couldn't get past. Like every 2 seconds when he went to leave, Fushi thought of Pionen. Well, she needs this. I should go back and give her this. Well, she needs this. I need to go back and give her this. Well, she's gonna get a cold. I need to make a coat. Oh, she's gonna stay here forever if I don't leave a note. Let me go leave a note. It was funny that he actually stole somebody's pen and paper just so he can make a duplicate. But yeah, he couldn't get over this fact that he himself didn't realize he needed to be with her. Like, he needed somebody. The loneliness that he talked about at the very end of the last episode continues. Like I mentioned with my thoughts on that last scene in the last episode, I think he's come to a realization that he just likes to be with people. As much as he hates the fact that he causes death, and even in this episode, he's lamenting on the fact that all these people, he names every single one of them, I have basically killed each one of these people by being around them. He can't get over his loneliness. So it's like this moment of almost like selfishness. Like, he selfishly desires to be with people even though he knows it'll cause them pain and cause them death. And it is counterbalanced with the aspect that he's acknowledging or at least with Pioren, she's acknowledging the and even the Beholder himself kind of mentions the idea that everybody grows, everybody will eventually die. He's mentioning the fact that Pioren will eventually die, and that humans themselves get to choose how that death's going to be. And Pioren's choosing him. She knows that she's going to face dangers being with him, but she's done everything she wants. There's this aspect of fulfillment, that she's fulfilled all the things that she's desired, and now this is what she wants. She wants to be with Fushi. She wants to help Fushi in some way. And that's the counterbalance that's happening. The desires of the selfish desires, the threat, the fulfillment. And it was really well portrayed. And I mean, we all kind of assumed that eventually Pioren was going to pass. I think she said at some point she's in her 90s, or she's nearing her 90s. I was personally grief-stricken by how it progressed because, I mean, granted, she is 90 years old, and 90 is about an age in which you're going to go senile. A lot of people face dementia and Alzheimer's. Me personally, having a father that had dementia, it hurt watching. Any show that has a character who's kind of losing themselves, it always hurts. And this was a similar case. The moment that she starts getting crazy and angry and she starts randomly walking away, it's like, yeah, it hurts. It hurts to watch. So it sucks that it wasn't just a simple let her go to sleep somewhere and it's done. No, we had to go down the path of basically her losing herself. And the Beholder even mentioning the fact that she's losing herself. It was really hard to watch. But it was interesting that Beholder technically points out the fact that he's smiling at times, almost as if he's gaining a new experience. I'm curious if that's really, I don't know, it's kind of like a unsettling thought that he would smile to that thought. But again, it's that aspect of, yes, technically, even if she is senile, he's still with her. He's technically helping her. He's holding her hand. He's supporting her. I did kind of get a chuckle the fact that he was going through each one of the characters, and he stays on Mia for a little bit, then goes and leaves the coat behind to Pyorin, and she acknowledges that somebody's there and grabs his hand, and he's like, "No, I'm a girl, don't you see?" And then she embraces him, and it hurt so bad to see him break. Like, he finally, again, at that same point, finally realized, I need Pyorin. I need companionship. But it was interesting, while he's with Pyorin, they're kind of mentioning rules that he set, and if the knockers are felt nearby, they need to run immediately. He can't be in any random animal form because he might lose a sense of himself and not be able to react fast enough. He's keeping a log, so he's writing down things as they happen so that he'll never forget them. And it seems like it's implying that he's impressioning it upon himself so that he can produce it again later, which I think is interesting. Like, essentially him creating a log of his story that he can produce at any point. Beholder mentioned at some point that he's kind of reached the development age of about 15 at some point. But yeah, that's pretty much most of their journey together, just kind of wandering around, keeping away from the knockers, developing a little bit, keeping a log, and then eventually, unfortunately, Pyorin kind of feels it coming. She lets Fushi know, go get, it's gonna rain, go get the fish, and we don't know why it rained. It was to cover up the tears. He leaves to go get the stuff, and that's when she lays down and calls out to the Beholder, or the man in black, the one that always follows Fushi. I don't know if they ever call him the Beholder in the show. I think he's just named the Beholder in most everything. But anyways, this was an interesting part because she says, if you care for Fushi at all, do these following things. Take me right now and let me be reborn as something that will be useful to Fushi. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Like an aspect of, rebirth, become a bird or something like that can become a part of Fushi's arsenal, so to speak. But it went into a little bit more than that than I thought that they would. Because essentially when she passes away, he kind of mentioned the idea that, if your soul is attached to your form. If you change your form, then you will no longer be what you are. Is that still okay with you? And with her desire of helping Fushi, she's like, she doesn't even hesitate. Yeah, do it. So what it shows is that, again, we see that the form of the girl with the purple hair, which again is the intro, which again ends up being Pyorin. This is her when she was younger. She always mentioned the idea that, she was so beautiful that many men wanted her. So now we finally get to see her beautiful younger self. She's walking on the beach side, and then eventually the Beholder steps in front of her. And I'm getting two ideas from what they're implying by this. He holds out the orb, which the orb was something of a symbolism of what Fushi was when he first started out. He dropped this orb upon the world. It touched the rock, became the rock. The wolf landed on it. He became the wolf. So this orb is technically a symbolism of the core of Fushi. So I get two things from this. One is that this is showing that, yes, Pyorin has become a part of Fushi's core. And this is a symbolism of him holding out this core and him choosing to be a part of it. Which, if that's the case, this implies that every single person that has experienced Fushi possibly were walking to paradise and Beholder gave them the option of becoming a part of Fushi. Which, that's a cool idea. But I don't necessarily think that's what's happening. My crazy theory is that this was showing, what did she say? Let me be reborn to something that will be useful to Fushi. What would be the most useful thing to Fushi? An ally. A physical ally. I think that was implying that the Beholder offered to Pyorin to become another core that will be exactly like Fushi. So essentially, she's going to become another Fushi. Now, the unfortunate thing from that, the fortunate thing is that she becomes an immortal just like Fushi, and she's going to have the abilities and capabilities that Fushi has, and they could eventually meet each other in the future. And I say in the future because the unfortunate aspect of this is that he's implied already that you will not retain yourself. So essentially, he's allowed her to rebirth as essentially the same thing Fushi is, but she doesn't remember anything, so she's going to have to hopefully eventually cross paths with him again, and hopefully not become an enemy. I'm assuming at that point she'll probably somehow recall him, and I think that would be a nice reunion between the two of them. Pyorin has technically been a longtime ally of Fushi for pretty much longer than any of the other characters have, so their bonds are very strong. So I hope that eventually she would recognize him immediately and they become friends. But that's interesting to have not just Fushi in the future, but possibly another Pyorin that is similar to Fushi in capabilities, that they can travel together as, immortal partners. But yeah, following this, he decides to continue on, and eventually we get a jump forward. He says that several decades have passed, and we get a scene where an explosion goes off, and what looks like an older Fushi is thrown through the sky into the water, and he comes back, and there's a core, it's dead, and he smiles. So again, I'm assuming it's Fushi because it's an older gentleman with white hair, and so that's where my assumption comes. So yeah, really cool episode. Like I said, it hurt to watch because of the whole aspect of, somebody that you care for kind of losing themselves, decaying mentally. That's always a hard thing for me to watch. Really cool in the idea that we get this kind of brief idea that they're going to jump forward in time and that we're going to possibly see a different future. Maybe getting into a progression of, human technology and getting more into, I don't know, industrial revolution or something. But, yeah, and like I said, I'm really, like I said in my previous impression, I'm really hoping that this episode, and I put a lot of hope into this episode. I'm like, I kind of hope that this episode will show me something that has me excited for the future. And I said that not knowing there was a second season. We already know there's a second season now. It's going to be in fall 2022. So super excited for that. But when I said that, it was more for the idea of giving me the hope to jump in back into the manga. And I wanted something. I wanted some kind of sign of a twist, some sign of an evolution in the storytelling that would get me excited. It sucked because the first thing they showed me is something that made me not like it. And that was knowing that Hayase is still in the story. We are still going to have Hayase in the show, and I'm sick of this character. Like I said before, I think this is like the worst villain. Not the worst villain, but one of the least interesting villains that I've seen in a lot of shows, especially for a villain that stays around for a long time. Usually when you have a villain that sticks around for a long time, there's something there to give it something, and I don't have anything with this character. But it remedied itself in the idea that we've not only, given me a really heartbreaking story with Pyorin's passing, we've seen a lot of development in Fushi in this episode, and the idea that he's acceptant of what damages he causes around him. He's acceptant of the fact that he's lonely and he wants partnership. And not only that, but we get the fact that Pyorin possibly, if my theory is correct, will be another immortal that will travel with Fushi possibly in the future, which I think is excellent because Pyorin's kind of grown on me. She is technically like that elderly mother, that grandmother that you gain wisdom from and you gain partnership from, and that's something that has been a staple in Fushi's story for a long time. So to know that she's not just going to become an old crepid form for him to switch into, but actually a partner in the future has me excited. Hopefully it doesn't take long for her to possibly appear into his story. Maybe it's something that we'll get into pretty quickly with the second season. But either way, it was the thing that gave me that extra aspect that evolved the story in a certain way. So definitely interesting, definitely exciting stuff to get into, hopefully, eventually. It was also interesting to see that the Beholder had the capability of doing that. It implies that the Beholder has no attachments to this paradise that he mentions, which is insinuating this idea of maybe a heaven or something. But he's able to possibly be there at the gate, so to speak, to alter somebody's possible fate. The extent of that, we'll have to wait to find out, I'm assuming, but that is interesting to kind of get that idea that he is technically, that he's not the top dog, so to speak, but he's not at the same time just a random passerby. He does have some sort of power and some sort of ability to manipulate the spirit itself. So, but yeah, that's my thoughts on the finale, episode 20 of To Your Eternity. I thank everybody for watching on a weekly basis to check out my impressions. I definitely appreciate you guys sticking around and checking out my weekly impressions. Definitely make sure to sub so that when come next year, when we get the second season, I'll be around here again to give my impressions. But hopefully you guys are sticking around for the other shows that I'll be doing impressions on. Eventually I'll be doing a review of this one, so if you want to get my overall thoughts, I'll do a review and post that later. But I thank you again for supporting me throughout these weekly posts for this series. And with that said, thank you all for watching. As usual, like this video, comment down below, let me know what you thought of this finale. Share this video if you can, support us on Patreon if you can, and y'all take care.